want to fill my soul. I want to belong to something like you, Pool Sir. I want to become a contract killer.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Remember when I kidnapped Bandhu and threatened him with great violence? I want some more. Oh, Pool, picture me, a 10-year-old Kirsten Dunst.
I'm gonna warn you guys right now, this isn't gonna be as nice as Deadpool 1. I've seen the movie 5 times. I remember when my friends invited me to see it for the second time, I actually thought, do I want to see that movie again? I don't know if I really liked it the first time. After watching it again, I can tell you right now, I don't. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off with the good. Deadpool 2 is not a bad movie. It is not as good as the original. I feel like it's because they gave them a bigger budget and they said, hey, do what works. But they took it overboard. So I'm gonna start with the good. Deadpool 2 still has heart, maybe even more than the first movie, because Deadpool's forced to deal with the loss of Vanessa. She's killed, and he decides that he actually wants to be a hero, and he tries to help Russell out. Russell is the mutant boy who's getting tortured, and let's just say the orphanage that he's at is doing things to him. I think that the cast was great. I had no problem with anybody. Everybody was good, especially Cable. You know, he's coming right off of doing Thanos, so you're like, is he gonna be able to do Cable and Thanos? He did Cable and Thanos. He was the perfect Cable, literally perfect. He was, his voice, the way, his look, his facial expressions, his demeanor, the way he talked, how he carried himself, he was literally Cable. So I give him that. The story, when they're not joking, man, this movie has some heart, and it's actually sad too. At one point, Deadpool and Russell are in prison, and they have a collar on their necks that inhibits them from using their powers, which means Wade Wilson / Deadpool, his cancer comes back and he's dying, and he's actually okay with it. He goes, let me just die here. It's fine. Whatever. He's okay with dying. And he even sees Vanessa in the afterlife, and she tells him that it's not time for him to come up here yet because he still has to do stuff. So I really like that they're playing with these themes and allowing Deadpool to show that he's not just a jokester. They introduced Juggernaut, which is awesome. The intro was pretty funny. The team up was funny. I think I should just go straight to the bad. The CGI in this movie. Juggernaut looks terrible. He looks like those pre-rendered cutscenes in a PlayStation 2 game where you're like, man, this is crazy. He looks like he would fit right into the God of War pre-rendered cutscenes because it's just so bad. At least in the last movie, I complained about it not having a good villain. This movie doesn't even have a villain because if you think about it, Wade and Cable don't team up to fight Juggernaut. They say, hey, Colossus, handle that. We're going to go fight some bad people. But the bad people they're not trained in combat. They have no way to fight back. They took the criticisms of the last movie that I had and they said, you know what? Forget it. Let's just ruin everything. So they said, literally, there was no competition. There was the ops. They weren't even, I'm sorry. The villain in this movie technically is the headmaster of the orphanage school, and Deadpool obviously has to kill him. But the problem is, technically it's not even Deadpool's villain. It's Russell's. They didn't even give Deadpool a villain, and Juggernaut technically is only free because of Russell wanting a friend, and Deadpool wasn't being a friend to him. So this is pointless. This is completely pointless. I'm just like, if Deadpool and Cable would have teamed up to fight Juggernaut, that would have been cool. They didn't, maybe for like 5 seconds, and then they're like, all right, let's go to the school and slaughter everybody. The jokes, it feels like they just said, every 5 seconds, throw a joke out. If it doesn't land, that's okay, because guess what? We got another joke coming. When I tell y'all, I did not laugh most of the time in this movie, and it was just jokes after jokes after jokes after jokes after jokes after joke. The whole thing where they set up the X-Force and then they die immediately, I'm like, oh, this is hilarious, but it's a waste of time. I talked about how this movie has some deep, serious moments. They're spread out between silliness. It's like there's the ribeye steak. You're like, oh, that's gonna be so good. And then they say, but to get to that ribeye, you're gonna have to eat some Jello covered in piss. So eat that, and then eventually the piss will go away. It'll be a little Jello. You're like, ooh, okay, this Jello's pretty good. Then your ribeye, and then back to the piss. These jokes do not land. The plot is so silly. They're just like, how do we find a way to make Cable and Deadpool friends? When Russell's saved, he stops being a villain in the future and doesn't kill Cable's family. So then Cable decides, instead of going back to the family that I just protected, I'm gonna stay here and abandon them. Who wrote this movie? Who put this together? Because this is so silly. The problem with the jokes is it ruins everything that it sets up. Like, it's like walking 2 steps forward, but the shoelaces are tied together and it falls over and hits its head. and then gets up. It's bleeding, and then it does it again over and over and over. Like, it doesn't make any sense why he would not go back to his family. His one mission was, I'm gonna protect my family from being exterminated by Russell. Then he protects his family and he goes, okay, I'm good. They don't need me anymore. Like, what? You have a little kid. Like, she's not even grown. It doesn't even make sense. How does that work? Doesn't that fuck up the timeline if you decide to stay here and not go back? But of course they didn't care about timelines because Deadpool takes his little wristwatch and then goes back in time and fixes a lot of stuff. And it's just like, man, if y'all aren't gonna take this movie seriously, why should we? I wish I could like Deadpool 2. Unfortunately, it came out literally right after Infinity War. So I was just like, maybe this will give me a refresher, but it made me appreciate Infinity War more. This is the almost mid. I have to give Deadpool 2 a 6 out of 10. And I hope Deadpool 3, you can have jokes, but you have to balance it with heart and action. Deadpool's supposed to be funny, but he has more layers than stupid dick jokes. Again, Deadpool 2, 6 out of 10.